Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we'll be doing the 045521 May-June 2019 paper, and this video will be focused on section B and question 2, 3, and 4. The rest of the questions will be in another video, so stay tuned for that video. Okay, question 2. The Saudi Arabian government is encouraging the growth of the private sector. It is a low-cost oil producer, but its exports to South Africa have fallen recently. South Africa has a floating foreign exchange rate, but its central bank has recently tried to prevent a large fall in its foreign exchange rate. Part A, decline of floating foreign exchange rate. So this is very straightforward. It's the price of a currency determined by the market forces. So just some additional knowledge that you should know. There's three types of exchange rate. There's the floating exchange rate, there's a fixed exchange rate, and there's a managed floating exchange rate. Okay, you don't actually need to know them in detail, but it's kind of good. It's a good thing to know. So floating exchange rate, which is what they're asking, is determined by market forces, so it fluctuates freely, and therefore it offers flexibility for the currency. But a fixed exchange rate, the currency value is pegged often to another currency, so it provides stability for the currency. And managed floating exchange rate is kind of in the middle, so it's market determined, so determined by market forces, kind of like floating exchange rate, but there's occasional interventions by the government. Okay, part B. Explain two benefits the government may gain from the growth of the private sector. So one of the benefits will be that the government will have increased tax revenue. Since the private sectors, they could be more productive. So a growth of the private sector will mean that they would earn more profit. So since they earn more profit, they will pay more tax to the government from their profit, because if you have higher tax, if you have higher profit, and you will pay higher tax. So obviously government will have higher tax revenue. And the second benefit to the government will be that there will be an increase in employment. So a growth in the private sector will mean that they're obviously doing really well. So that means that maybe private firms are growing. So when a firm grows, they will want to employ more employees. So this reduces government spending on unemployment benefits, since less and less people are unemployed. Okay, part C. Analyze why a country with low cost of production may experience a decrease in its exports. Okay, so low cost of production, and then why they may experience low exports, a decrease in exports. Okay, so there could be protectionism measures such as import tariffs that's imposed on the country's export by another country. So that means that even though they have a low production cost, they would still not really see an increase in their exports, because the other country, they impose import tariffs, which makes purchasing their exports more expensive still, even though they have low production costs. And the next reason could be that the quality of their exports actually decrease due to low production costs. So since their quality is lower, it may reduce demand, so therefore a decrease in exports. Third reason is that the incomes abroad could have fallen. So since their disposable income is lower, they can't really afford it, even though the exports may have become cheaper, but because other people's income also decreased, now they can't really afford it. So they have lower purchasing power. Okay, fourth reason will be that the foreign firms could have even lower costs. So that means that this country, even though they have low production costs, their competing foreign firms have even lower costs, which makes them even more competitive. So these countries' firms, they are not as competitive in comparison. Okay, part D. Discuss whether or not a government should prevent a fall in its country's foreign exchange rate. Okay, so discuss question, you will need to talk about both sides. So yes, the government should prevent a fall in the country's foreign exchange rate. So this could be because a fall in the country's foreign exchange rate could lower confidence for the country's currency. And with lower confidence, it will reduce investment in the country, which limits economic growth, which isn't really desirable. So yeah, that's one of the reasons. The second reason would be that it will increase the price of imports. So like imported raw materials become more expensive, which increases the cost of production for domestic firms. And this could lead to cost push inflation, which is obviously not good. And the third reason would be that there may be an increase in price of the goods, which reduces the purchasing power and lowers living standards of people in the country. So obviously the government would try to prevent that. So yeah. Okay, so the next part would be no, the government should not prevent a fall in the country's foreign exchange rate. Okay, so why? A fall in the country's exchange rate would mean that the price of exports will be lower, so it's more affordable. So it may make them more price competitive, and it could increase their export revenue. So this would lead to an improvement in the current account balance, which is something that's good, is desirable. And the second reason is it may increase demand for the country's products, which will increase their output and reduce unemployment, so it will lead to economic growth. So yeah. Okay, question 3. In February 2017, Europe experienced a shortage of fresh vegetables due to bad weather. For a period of time, the markets for a number of vegetables, including broccoli and lettuces, were not in equilibrium. The price of food tends to fluctuate more than the price of manufactured goods and services. These fluctuations influence the rate of inflation. Part A. When is a market in equilibrium? Okay, so this is very straightforward. It's kind of like the definition for market equilibrium. So it's when demand equals supply. And for this question, you can also draw a demand and supply diagram. So make sure to label the price and the quantity, and then label the supply and demand curve. And then you need to label the market equilibrium. So P1, Q1, and then this market equilibrium. Part B. Explain how a rise in the price of food would affect a country's consumer price index. Okay, so to explain this, you can start with defining consumer price index, or CPI. So CPI is a measure of inflation. And then you can explain that since food is a necessity, its demand is inelastic. So a rise in food prices would lead to inflation because people would still want to buy the food since it's a necessity. You can't really stop buying food. And therefore, when the prices for food rise, people will still have to buy it since its demand is inelastic. So that means that there would just be inflation. And since food is an item in CPI, in the Consumer Price Index, and it has a relatively large weighting, because people tend to spend a large portion of their income on food. Yeah, and you're just kind of explaining like the concept of food in CPI here. So as the proportion spent only declines when income increases. So as people become richer, they will tend to spend less of their income on food and more on like other stuff, because obviously there comes a point where you stop buying even more food because obviously you don't eat so much food. So it kind of takes out less and less of your income as it increases. Okay, part C. Analyze using a demand and supply diagram how bad weather is likely to affect the market for broccoli. Okay, so you need to draw the demand and supply diagram here. So bad weather will cause the supply diagram to shift to the left. And take note that it's a shift and it's not a movement, so you need to draw another supply diagram to the left. And it's good to draw an arrow that's like it going to the left. And then label the demand and supply. Obviously make sure to label S1, S2, and then label the equilibriums P2, P1, and Q2, Q1. And then make sure to label the axis, the price of broccoli, and the quantity of broccoli. Okay, now you have to explain that bad weather will reduce the supply of broccoli as the crop could have been destroyed by the weather, and this means that the price of the broccoli will increase. So that's how it affects the market for broccoli. Part D, discuss whether or not a higher inflation rate will benefit producers. So first part will be that a higher inflation rate will benefit producers, and reason for this. Higher inflation rate will mean that there's an increase in revenue and profit since the prices of the goods may rise, and if cost rises by less, then it benefits the producers. And second reason will be that higher inflation rate will mean that it's cheaper for producers to borrow because the burden of their past debts will reduce, and this usually occurs if the inflation rate rises more than the interest rate. Okay, third reason will be that higher inflation rate in other countries will benefit domestic producers. And this will be because that since the foreign countries their prices is much higher compared to the domestic prices, that means that domestic producers, they may experience an increase in demand for their goods, so it's beneficial for domestic producers. Okay, so the next part will be a higher inflation rate will not benefit producers, and this is because their products may be less price competitive since they are facing inflation, and this could be also because like increased cost of production. So like your raw materials are more expensive due to inflation, so your production cost is like it goes up, and since your product is having a higher price, there will be a lower demand and lower profit earned, and this could also lead to lower exports or lower revenue. Okay, question 4. Changes in the supply of enterprise result in the development of new firms. In 2016, a theme park in Hong Kong made a loss with visitor numbers falling by 9%. In 2017, the same public limited company opened another larger theme park in Shanghai. The new theme park is expected to benefit from both internal and external economies of scale. Part A, define a loss. Okay, so a loss is when costs exceed revenue. And you can kind of like think of this from the profit formula, which is profit equals revenue minus cost. So if a firm is making a loss, the revenue earned is lower than the production cost. So it's also like you can say that as when costs exceed revenues, then someone's making a loss. Okay, part B. Explain, giving examples, the difference between an internal economy of scale and an external economy of scale. So define both the internal and external economy of scale. So internal economy of scale is the benefit gained from the firm itself. So it could be like purchasing economies or financial economies. So what's purchasing economies? It's when the large firms, they bulk buy so that they can enjoy cost saving advantages. And usually small firms, they can't really do this because obviously they don't produce a lot, so they can't really bulk buy. But when large firms bulk buy, they're like whoever they're buying from, they tend to let them give them a discount because they're buying so much. So this is purchasing economies, which is basically a cost saving advantage. And financial economies is like when large firms, they want to maybe start out a new project or like invest in a new technology. They may like take out a loan, and they're more likely to be granted a loan by the bank or have like lower interest rate from the bank compared to small firms, because the banks know, they trust these large firms because they know like they're more likely to be able to pay them back. While for small firms, banks they may not really trust them because they're like, oh, maybe they can't really pay back, so they can't really enjoy lower interest rate. Okay, so external economy of scale is the benefit gained from the industry by the firm. So an example it would be government policies. So for example, the government may impose like subsidies to the firms in this particular industry, and this benefits all the firms in the industry. Yeah. Part C. Analyze how a government could increase the supply of enterprise. So they could increase spending on education and training. This is a supply side policy, which improves the skills of people and increases the ability to create successful startups, which would therefore increase the supply of enterprise. A second way could be to provide grants or subsidies, which increases the incentives to start up. Third reason would be to relax immigration laws. So this increases the likelihood of immigrants coming into the country to set up businesses, which would also increase the supply of enterprise. Okay, part D. Discuss whether or not consumers would benefit from a firm changing from being a public limited company to a public corporation or a state-owned enterprise. Okay, so the first part, yes, consumers will benefit from a firm changing from a public limited company to a public corporation. So reason for this is that there could be lower prices for a public corporation. So public corporation, they may charge lower prices for consumers, so it's more affordable. And the reason they may charge lower prices would be that public corporations, they tend to have social benefits as their goal. So they want to maximize the benefits to society. So they could be subsidized by the government, so they can offer lower prices compared to public limited companies. Second reason, they are less likely to go out of business, so supply will be less likely to run out. So the reason why they are less likely to go out of business is because they're kind of supported by the government, so they won't really kind of go bankrupt. So obviously consumers, they won't kind of have to worry because they will never have like they will never run out of whatever product that they are purchasing from this public corporation. Okay, so third reason would be that they are more likely to follow health and safety rules because they are under the government, so obviously they kind of have to follow these rules, so their products may be more safe. Okay, so next part would be that no consumers will not benefit from a firm changing from a public limited company to a public corporation. So why could this be? It could be that they're less productive or more inefficient because they don't have profit incentives, so they don't really want to kind of maximize their productivity. And second reason could be that they lack funds to invest in new technology, so they have lower output because usually since they are supported by the government, they may have limited access to finance or like financial support, so they can't really invest in like new technology. So yeah, that's it for this video. Thank you for watching and I hope it was helpful.